As I said in my previous presentation, about 1/3 to 1/2 of the world's population are introverts, people who tend to be more productive when they're not surrounded by lots of distraction or people and they're in quieter, low-key environments. The problem is our society is biased. Our most important institutions, our schools and our workplaces, are often designed for extroverts and their need for lots of stimulation. Picture the typical grade school classroom. Kids are no longer seated in rows of desks. They're seated in these pods of desks of 4 or 5 or 6 kids all facing each other, and they're working on countless group assignments, even in subjects like creative writing and math, which you would think depend on solo flights of thought. Kids are now expected to act as committee members. And teachers often say that the ideal student is the extrovert as opposed to the introvert, even though introverts are usually more knowledgeable and tend to get better grades according to research. We can see the same thing in our workplaces. Now most offices have an open plan without walls where everyone is subject to the constant noise and the gaze of their coworkers. And when it comes to leadership, introverts are routinely passed over for leadership positions, even though they tend to be more careful and much less likely to take outsized risks. Now, in fact, some of our most transformative leaders in history have been introverts. Eleanor Roosevelt, Rosa Parks, Gandhi, all of them described themselves as quiet and soft-spoken, and even shy. And they all took the spotlight, even though every bone in their body was telling them not to. And what's so special about this is people could look to them and see that they weren't, leading because they enjoyed directing others and they liked being looked at. They were leading because they had no choice. They were driven to do what they thought was right. Now, at this point, I think it's important for me to say that I actually love introverts. Well, my best friend and roommate is, extroverts. My best friend and roommate is an extrovert, and we get along just fine, and I love her to death. She's lived with me in this tiny dorm room for 2 years. Another important thing to remember is we all fall at different points along the introvert-extrovert spectrum. Even Carl Jung, the psychologist who first made these terms popular, he said that there's no such thing as a pure introvert or a pure extrovert. But many of us do recognize as one type or the other. I believe and sincerely hope that when it comes to our attitudes toward introversion and quiet and to solitude, we are on the brink of dramatic change. Culturally, we need a much better balance between introverts and extroverts, more of a yin and yang between the two. But how can we get there? Stop the madness for constant group work. Now, don't get me wrong, I deeply believe our offices should be encouraging casual, cafe-style types of interaction, the kind where people come together and serendipitously exchange ideas. Those are important. They're great. They're great for introverts and they're great for extroverts. But we need much more privacy and much more freedom and much more autonomy at work. The same thing in schools. We need to be teaching kids to work together for sure, but we also need to be teaching them how to work on their own. This is important for extroverts as well, because working on your own is where most of deep thought comes from. Now, I'm not calling for the abolishing of all teamwork. The problems that we face today in fields like science and economics are so vast and so complex that we're going to need armies of people coming together, different types of people with different types of ideas coming together to solve them. But I am saying that the more freedom we give them to be themselves, the more introverts are more likely to come up with their own unique solutions to these problems. In a culture where being social and outgoing are prized above all else, it can be difficult and sometimes shameful to be an introvert. 6-year-old me thought it best to tell my family that I wanted to be a rock star when, in fact, I wanted to say writer. What we need to remember is that introverts bring extraordinary talents and abilities to the world and should be encouraged to accomplish things in whatever environment that they feel that they will be most successful in. Thank you.